Namely, every hostess, rolling her eyes to heaven and pointing to the chicken, would say with great feeling that it was the famous Pamir pheasant, and that it had been specially sent to them from Pamir from their dear nephew who resided there as consul for their great fatherland. On that planet, there exist, in general, congeries for every possible kind of purpose. These congeries began multiplying, particularly after many of the beings of this peculiar planet had become specialists in supernatural phenomena, and came to be called occultists, spiritualists, theosophists, violet magicians, chiromants, and so forth. Besides being able to create supernatural phenomena, these specialists also knew very well how to make the opaque look transparent. This same American prohibition of the consumption of alcohol can serve us yet again as an excellently illuminating example for understanding to what degree the possibilities for the crystallizations of data for being reflection are atrophied in these contemporary responsible power-possessing beings, in respect of the fact that such an absurdity is being actually repeated there. There on that continent, everybody without exception, thanks to this prohibition, now consumes this same alcohol, even those who in other circumstances would probably never have consumed it. There on the continent America, the very same is occurring with the consumption of alcohol as occurred with the chewing of the seeds of the poppy by the beings of the country Maral-Plessis. The difference is that in the country of Maral-Plessis, the beings were then addicted to the use of at least the genuine poppy seeds, whereas in America the beings now consume any liquid that comes their way, provided only that it bears the name of some alcoholic liquid existing somewhere on their planet. And another difference is that in respect of concealing their consumption of the prohibited product from government eyes, the contemporary beings now breeding on the continent America are not by any means so naive as were the beings of the Maral-Plessis epoch. To what lengths your contemporary favorites have gone in this respect you can understand very well from the following examples. At the present time, there in that place, every young man with his mother's milk scarcely dry on his lips infallibly carries with him what seems to be a perfectly ordinary harmless cigarette case or cigar case. And sitting in a restaurant, or in one of their famous dance halls, he casually produces this cigarette case or cigar case from his pocket, and everybody around imagines, of course, that he is about to smoke. But not a bit of it. He just gives a peculiar little twist to this cigarette case or cigar case of his, when, presto, a diminutive tumbler appears in his left hand, whereupon with his right hand he slowly and quietly pours out for himself from this cigarette case or cigar case into this diminutive tumbler of his some kind of liquid, probably Scotch whiskey, but concocted, as I've already told you, on some barge off the American coast. During my observations there at that time, I once witnessed still another picture. In one of the said restaurants sat two young American women not far from my table. An attendant of this restaurant, or as they say, a waiter, served them with a bottle of some mineral water and a couple of glasses. One of the women gave a certain little twist to the handle of her fashionable umbrella, whereupon a liquid, obviously also Scotch whiskey or something of the kind, began likewise to flow very quietly and very slowly from the handle into their glasses. In short, my boy, the same is being repeated on this continent America as also took place quite recently in the large community called Russia. There the power-possessing responsible beings also prohibited the consumption of the famous Russian vodka, with the consequence that these beings very soon adapted themselves to consume, instead of this vodka, the no less famous hanja, from the effects of which thousands of these unfortunate beings are still dying there daily. But in the present case, we must certainly give the contemporary American beings their due, in their skill at concealing their consumption of this famous alcohol from the authorities. They are infinitely more civilized than the beings of the community Russia. Well then, my boy, to avoid the bustle of the street, I entered a typical New York restaurant, and having taken a seat at one of the tables there, began gazing out of the window at the crowd. As it is the common custom there on your planet, when people sit in a restaurant or any other such public place, always and without fail to pay what they call money for something for the profit of the proprietor of the establishment, I did the same, and also ordered for myself a glass of their famous what is called orangeade. This famous American drink consists of the juice squeezed from oranges, or from the famous what is called their grapefruit, and the beings of that continent drink it always and everywhere in incredible quantities. It must be admitted that this famous orangeade of theirs does occasionally refresh them in hot weather, but on the other hand, in its actions upon what are called the mucous membranes of the stomach and intestines, this drink of theirs is still another of the many factors there which, taken together, are gradually bringing about, although slowly, yet inexorably, certainly the destruction of that unnecessary and negligible function called the digestive function of the stomach. Well then, sitting in the said restaurant with this famous orangeade and watching the passers-by in the hope of seeing among them the mister I awaited, I began casually looking around at the objects in the restaurant also. On the table at which I was sitting, I saw, among other things, also what is called the menu of the restaurant. Menu, there on your planet, is the name given to a sheet of paper on which are written the names of all the varieties of food and drink available in the said restaurant. Reading the contents of this paper, I found, among other things, that no fewer than 78 different dishes could be ordered there that day. This staggered me, and I wondered what on earth kind of stove these Americans must have in their kitchens to be able to prepare 78 dishes on it for just one day. I ought to add that I had been on every one of the continents there, and had been the guest of a great many beings of different castes. And I had seen food prepared innumerable times, and also in my own house. So I already more or less knew that to prepare a single dish, at least 2 or 3 saucepans were required. And I reckoned that as these Americans prepared 78 dishes in one kitchen, they would certainly need about 300 pots and pans. I had the fancy to see for myself how it was possible to accommodate on one stove 300 saucepans. So I decided to offer what is called there a good tip to